Thank you so much for joining Tea Party Patriots Action Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots. I'm Jenny Beth Martin, and in just a moment, we'll go to Bill Pasco, who will give our Washington report. Before we go to Bill, I just want to make a comment about the impending arrest of President Trump. What we are seeing right now in our country is utter lawlessness. It's politically motivated revenge against a former president, candidate for United States president in the next election for a supposed crime that even the Department of Justice, the former district attorney in New York, and even the current district attorney previously declined to indict or to follow through with a prosecution. It is wrong, it is absolutely wrong, and it is disgusting. They're going after President Trump because they don't like what he did in office. He grew the economy. He reduced unemployment. He showed us that America can be great. He helped people across the country understand the greatness of America, and he shined a huge, bright spotlight on all of the corruption, or so much of the corruption, that goes on in D.C. And that light is still shining on Washington, D.C., and we see the corruption unfold day after day after day, and now we're seeing it unfold in New York. I think we need to be prepared that there will also be indictments out of Fulton County, Georgia, and also related to the classified documents that a president single-handedly, by his own voice, has the ability to declassify. And we just need to brace ourselves for that. What I urge you to do is be angry. You have every reason to be angry, and then take that emotion and take all of that passion that you have. The reason that you're angry is because you love America and you know America can be greater than what we are seeing right now, and because you see the unjustness in what is going on. Take all of that emotion and passion and just funnel it into productive action. We have to defeat the radical leftists who seek to destroy our country in the ballot box in 2024. It is not going to be easy. It is not going to be a fun challenge for us because we're so frustrated and so angry about what is happening, but it must be done. So take all of that anger and all of that emotion and keep working towards what we can do to help President Trump, and most importantly, to help this country. At Tea Party Patriots Action, we are continuing to work on election integrity, and we will continue to do that going into 2024. We have to be able to have faith in the outcome of the election, and we have to make sure that we have eyes watching the people who are running elections to ensure they follow the law and they do what they are supposed to do. Additionally, our Super PAC, Tea Party Patriots Citizens Fund, will be engaged in elections in 2024. We're not engaged yet. We are doing a lot of work to prepare for 2024, but we are not engaged in elections yet. You can go ahead and get involved in elections if you want early, and it makes sense to do so. Sign up to volunteer and to make sure that we are doing all that we can to prepare the ground so that we can get out the vote in 2024 and defeat these radical leftists who are tyrannical and intent on destroying the country that we love so much. Those are positive steps that we can take, and I urge you to hold on to those positive actions that we can take, because that's where we have some power and something within our control that we can do to make a difference. And finally, there are two other things I think are very important for us to do. The most important other thing is that we need to be praying for our country. We need to be praying for President Trump and for his family. We need to be praying for all of the political prisoners in our country right now. And we need to pray for those who seek to prosecute these people and who wish to destroy us. It's hard to hear that, and sometimes it kind of seems frustrating because we're angry and maybe we don't want to pray for those people. But the Bible teaches us it's important to pray for our enemies, and we need to be doing that. And they're treating us as if they are our enemies. So make sure that you go to God and that you're praying for our country, and that you do so as the Bible has taught us to pray. And the final thing that I urge you to do is not to lose hope and not to lose faith in this great country of ours. It seems very bleak and very dark at the moment, and I cannot promise that there won't be darker and bleaker days ahead. What I can assure you is that if we all continue to stand for what we know is true, what we know is right, and for the greatness of America and the greatness that America can be, that America will survive. America, our country, our Constitution, and our way of government are stronger than any set of corrupt, evil, tyrannical politicians. So continue to hold on to the greatness of America and to love our country. And if you didn't love our country, I don't think you would be as frustrated as you are with the treatment that we are seeing for President Trump. So those are the things that I urge you to do today, and that's my call to action for you today. We'll have other things on our website that deal with legislation. Congress is out this week because of the Easter holiday, so it's kind of their spring break. And I think that these three actions, preparing to be involved in elections in 2024, going ahead and volunteering with campaigns if you want to do that, engaging in election integrity activities is very important, and then pray for our country and don't lose hope in America. And with that, I'm going to go to Bill Pasco, who will give us our Washington report.
Thank you, Jenny Beth. The House and Senate are in recess and will not return until Monday, April 17. Last week in the House came back on Monday and took up and passed two bills under suspension of the rules. On Tuesday, the House took up and passed the rule governing floor consideration of H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Costs Act. On Wednesday, the House began considering amendments to H.R. 1. Over the course of Wednesday and Thursday, the House considered 14 amendments and agreed to 10 of them. On Thursday, having disposed of the 14 amendments, the House passed H.R. 1, the Lower Energy Costs Act, by a vote of 225 to 204, with 4 Democrats crossing party lines to vote in favor of the bill, and 1 Republican, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, voting against it. The House GOP leadership was very excited about the votes of the 4 Democrats because that allows the GOP leadership to call it a bipartisan bill. And then they were done. Last week in the Senate returned on Monday and voted to invoke cloture on S-316, the bill to repeal the 1991 and 2002 authorizations for the use of military force against Iraq. On Tuesday, the Senate considered amendments to the bill. First up was Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson's Amendment 11, an attempt to force the Biden administration to submit to the Senate for ratification as a treaty any international convention, agreement, or other instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response reached by the World Health Assembly. That failed by a vote of 47 to 49. Then the Senate took up 5 more amendments, each of which failed. On Wednesday morning, the bill passed by a vote of 66 to 30. Then the Senate voted to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed to S-870, the Fire Grants and Safety Act. Then the Senate took up and passed H.J. Res. 27, a CRA resolution of disapproval of the rules submitted by the Department of the Army, Corps of Engineers, Department of Defense, and the Environmental Protection Agency relating to revised definition of waters of the United States. The vote for the resolution was 53 to 41. Then the Senate took up and passed H.J. Res. 7, a joint resolution declaring terminated the national emergency declared by President Trump on March 13, 2020. That resolution passed by a vote of 68 to 23. Later Wednesday evening, Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley went to the floor of the Senate to seek unanimous consent that the Senate begin work on his S-85, the No TikTok on United States Devices Act. Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul rose to object and prevented the Senate from taking up Hawley's bill. We'll talk more about that and other attempts to rein in TikTok in a few moments. On Thursday, the Senate voted to confirm Richard R. Verma to be Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources. Then the Senate voted to confirm Laura Taylor Kale to be an Assistant Secretary of Defense. And then they were done. Turns out AG Garland lied to Congress. Just over a month ago, Attorney General Merrick Garland made his first appearance before a committee of the 118th Congress when he testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. While there, he faced rather tough questioning from Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz, who pressed Garland to explain why the Department of Justice hasn't prosecuted any of the hundreds of protesters who broke the law to demonstrate outside the private homes of 6 Supreme Court justices, despite there being a federal law outlawing such activity while the court is considering a case, lest the demonstrations sway the justices' thinking. Garland responded to Cruz that he was the first Attorney General to offer the protection of federal marshals to the justices, but then said that arresting the demonstrators was a decision he left to the marshals. His prosecutors couldn't prosecute anyone unless arrests were made, and there were no arrests made because the marshals didn't think there was a need to arrest anyone. The marshals on scene make that determination, he said. Well, first, that's rubbish. Marshals don't decide whether to prosecute. Prosecutors decide whether to prosecute. Second, it turns out that wasn't the truth. Alabama Republican Senator Katie Britt revealed Tuesday at a hearing of the Senate Appropriations Committee that a training package used for the deputy marshals deployed to protect the justices' homes last year contained information showing that the marshals were directed to try not to make arrests. The documents revealed that arrests were not to be a priority. They were actively discouraged from doing so, said Senator Britt. Britt asked Garland at the hearing if he was aware of the training package. He said he was not. She asked him to look into it. Stay tuned. Senate Republicans on the Judiciary Committee are very unhappy that Supreme Court justices were targeted for protests last year, and they're not going to let Garland off the hook on this. Now, back to stopping TikTok. A week ago Thursday, TikTok CEO Shou Zi Chew spent 5 hours testifying in front of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. By all accounts, it did not go well. Despite the millions of dollars TikTok has spent on Washington lobbyists, and despite Chew's best efforts, many lawmakers continue to make clear their alarm over national security concerns. Said Washington Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers, chairwoman of the committee, in her opening statement, TikTok surveils us all, and the Chinese Communist Party is able to use this as a tool to manipulate America as a whole. We do not trust TikTok will ever embrace American values. Your platform should be banned. Fast forward 6 days, and Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley went to the Senate floor to push a bill to outlaw TikTok in the United States. That would certainly be one way of handling the national security concerns, just prohibit the act from being legal. There's a hitch with that approach, though. It runs afoul of the Constitution. Specifically, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3 says, no bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. Article 1, Section 10 says no state may enact a bill of attainder either. According to the Library of Congress, a bill of attainder is legislation that imposes punishment on a specific person or group of people without a judicial trial. In other words, a bill of attainder is a piece of legislation that declares a party as guilty of a crime just for being. We don't do that. It undermines the separation of powers, and it undermines the individual's right to a trial by jury. So we don't outlaw people or companies. We outlaw behavior. So that's the first problem with Hawley's bill. It's flat out unconstitutional. The second problem with Hawley's bill, as Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul sees it, is that Hawley's bill is an assault on the free speech guaranteed by the First Amendment, in that TikTok is a social media platform and nothing more. Writing in the Louisville Courier-Journal last week, Paul said, the banning TikTok strategy also comes while the GOP simultaneously complains of liberal U.S. social media companies canceling and censoring conservatives. So without a hint of irony, many of these same conservatives now agitate to ban a platform owned by an international group that includes several American investors. So on the one hand, Republicans complain about censorship, while with the other hand, these same Republicans advocate to censor social media apps that they worry are influenced by the Chinese. Speaking on the Senate floor, Paul said, I think we should be wary of those who peddle fear. I think we should be wary of those who use fear to coax Americans to relinquish our liberties, to regulate and limit our First Amendment rights. Every accusation of data gathering that's been attributed to TikTok could also be attributed to domestic big tech companies. In fact, one of the bills they're looking at doing is broad enough that the president will be given the power to designate whatever country he sees fit to be an adversary, and whatever company underneath that definition. It would basically be a limitless authority for the president to ban speech. That second bill Senator Paul was describing is the so-called Restrict Act, introduced by Virginia Democrat Senator Mark Warner, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Restrict is an acronym for Restricting the Emergence of Security Threats that Risk Information and Communications Technology. The bill has 25 co-sponsors, of whom 13 are Republicans. We'll talk more about this bill in future Washington reports. The Pentagon pays for abortion. For several weeks now, Alabama Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville has been single-handedly blocking the promotions of 160 military commanders in order to compel Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to reverse a February directive that gives members of the armed forces increased access to abortion services, including administrative leave and paying for associated travel costs. Tuberville views this, quite correctly in my view, as taxpayer funding of abortion. He opposes taxpayer funding of abortion and is using his powers as a senator to make Democrats pay a price for what he views as illegal policy behavior. Tuberville isn't the only Republican senator who views the DOD policy as illegal. South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who served his country for more than 3 decades, retiring at the rank of colonel, agrees with Tuberville. I think what they're doing is illegal, he said. I don't think they have the authority to do this. Basically, they're setting a policy to give people leave, to use taxpayer dollars, which I think runs afoul of existing law. Friday, Punchbowl News reported that Tuberville had asked the Government Accounting Office if the Pentagon's abortion access policy is subject to congressional review. Senate Democrats spent the week hammering Tuberville on the floor of the Senate and in press conferences, saying he was threatening national security. Tuberville's response? "I'm used to this," said the former Auburn football coach. "I stood on the sidelines with thousands of people screaming and yelling at me and throwing beer bottles at me. I've had 0 beer bottles thrown at me in the Senate yet." There's no telling how this will end. Tuberville has made clear he wants more than a vote on the policy question. Democrats are digging in. They think the policy question is the right one, and they are concerned that if they give in, it might send a signal that if you're in the minority party and you oppose a given policy, you can block military confirmations to get what you want. Stay tuned. Now to the debt ceiling. Speaker Kevin McCarthy hasn't met with President Biden to discuss raising the debt ceiling since February 1. That's more than 2 months ago, and he's getting a bit peeved that Biden doesn't seem to be willing to talk. So on Thursday, McCarthy said House Republicans are prepared to pass their own debt ceiling bill if Biden won't agree to discuss terms with him over raising the nation's debt limit. McCarthy said the House GOP conference is very close to agreement on the issue. Asked to explain what a House GOP debt ceiling bill might look like, McCarthy said it would contain provisions to cut and cap discretionary spending, claw back unspent COVID relief funds, and establish new work requirements for federal benefits. In addition, there would be provisions related to energy and the border crisis. This is the first time McCarthy has said the House could act alone on the debt ceiling. Now to entitlement reform. In a classic Friday afternoon episode of Take Out the Trash Day, that is, releasing bad news late on a Friday afternoon, so fewer people will see it on the news Friday night or read about it in the newspapers on Saturday morning, the boards of trustees of the Social Security and Medicare trust funds released their annual report on the health of the 2 major entitlement programs. The news was mixed. The Medicare Trust Fund, said the report, will be solvent until 2031, 3 years later than projected, as recently as last year, while the Social Security Trust Fund will be depleted in 2033, 1 year earlier than projected last year. If no changes are made to either program, there will not be enough money coming in the front door to maintain 100% payment of scheduled benefits going out the back door. If no changes are made, Social Security will only be able to pay about 77% of its obligations, which is another way of saying we're on track for a 23% cut in Social Security benefits, said Mark Goldwyn, Senior Vice President and Senior Policy Director for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Lawmakers who insist they won't touch these programs are endorsing a 20% cut to Social Security benefits and major disruptions to health care services. Both trust funds will be depleted within 10 years, which puts the problem within the 10-year budget window. President Biden released a plan to extend the life of the Medicare program by 2 decades, largely by increasing taxes. He has not released a plan for extending the lifespan of the Social Security program. Now to the Trump indictment. Last Thursday, a Manhattan grand jury indicted President Trump. According to CNN, the indictment contains more than 30 counts related to business fraud. This is the first time in history that a president or former president has faced criminal charges. The indictment was filed under seal and will not be revealed until Trump is arraigned, which we understand will take place in Manhattan on Tuesday. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi reiterated her ignorance in a tweet she posted a few hours after the news broke, declaring, "The grand jury has acted upon the facts and the law. No one is above the law, and everyone has the right to a trial to prove innocence," which is, of course, exactly backwards. In the U.S., one is considered innocent until proven guilty, and the burden is on the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused has committed the crime. Former FBI Director James Comey tweeted, "It's been a good day," because, as law professor Jonathan Turley said, nothing says ethical leadership like a patently political prosecution. It appears Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg has indicted Trump for violations of Section 175 of New York state law for falsifying business records. In this case, to be specific, declaring as legal expenses the $130,000 paid to Stormy Daniels to buy her silence when she threatened to go public in the midst of a presidential campaign with a claim that she had had an extramarital affair with Trump 10 years earlier. Falsifying a business record in New York is a misdemeanor, and it has a statute of limitations of 2 years, so it's too late to charge Trump with that crime. But New York law says you can upgrade that misdemeanor into a felony, which also has the advantage of having a longer statute of limitations, if you can prove the crime was committed in conjunction with another crime. So Bragg apparently is trying to tie the falsifying a business record charge to Trump accepting an illegal campaign contribution, thereby turning the falsifying a business record into a felony. Here's the problem with that. The $130,000 hush money payoff expense can only be considered a campaign expense if it's meant to influence the outcome of an election and it would not have taken place outside the context of the campaign. Neither one of those conditions is necessarily true, and DA Bragg will have a very hard time proving either, let alone both. Celebrities and rich people pay people off all the time for reasons that have nothing to do with the campaign. They pay people off because they're embarrassed, or they don't want trouble in their marriage, or they don't want to suffer harm to their reputation. None of those things have anything to do with the campaign. In fact, this exact question was litigated in 2011 when Democrat John Edwards was charged with multiple campaign finance violations for accepting more than $1 million from a campaign donor to pay off his mistress during his 2008 campaign for president. The jury found him not guilty of one charge of accepting an illegal donation and deadlocked on 5 other charges, and the Department of Justice decided not to retry him. Not only was this legal question adjudicated in the Edwards case, this case itself was examined by the Federal Department of Justice years ago. The Robert Mueller-led Russia hoax investigation looked into this avenue as a potential means of getting Trump, and former FBI Director Mueller decided the case was too weak. And the Office of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York decided on its own in 2019 to close its investigation of the matter with no recommendation for prosecution, and so did Cyrus Vance Jr., Bragg's predecessor as Manhattan District Attorney. And don't forget, even if you accept as true Daniels' version of the story, which Trump denies, and which Daniels herself denied earlier, Trump in 2016 was not the only candidate for president who paid somebody for something and then falsely labeled that something legal fees. The Hillary Clinton campaign, which paid for the so-called Steele dossier opposition research file on Trump, I'll refer to it as an opposition research file, even though large parts of it appear to have been wholly made up, reported the expense to the Federal Election Commission as a legal expense. So you literally have both presidential campaigns filing false records of expenses in the same election. You're going to charge one of them, but not the other? One of the key witnesses for Bragg's case against Trump is Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer who was convicted and went to prison. Cohen is an admitted liar and won't make the best witness on the stand. This case is so bad that legal commentator and law professor Jonathan Turley wrote of it, "Although it may be politically popular, the case is legally pathetic." Bragg is struggling to twist state laws to effectively prosecute a federal case long ago rejected by the Justice Department against Trump over his payment of hush money to former stripper Stormy Daniels. In 2018, yes, that is how long this story has been around, I wrote how difficult such a federal case would be under existing election laws. Now, 6 years later, the same theory may be shoehorned into a state claim. So if the indictment is what we think it is, the legal case against Trump is shaky to say the least. It's no wonder the Department of Justice walked away from it. Now comes the Manhattan District Attorney determined to prosecute Trump for something, anything. This really does look like a witch hunt. Not surprisingly, the indictment plays as a political plus for Trump in the short term. A Yahoo News YouGov survey fielded after the news of the indictment showed Trump surging to his largest lead over Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a likely 2024 GOP nomination challenger. In the most recent previous Yahoo News YouGov survey, fielded 2 weeks earlier, Trump led DeSantis by 8 points at 47 to 39% in a two-way race among registered voters who identified as Republican or Republican-leaning independents. As recently as February, DeSantis led Trump in the same poll by 45 to 41%. In the new survey, Trump is crushing DeSantis by 26 points at 57 to 31%. Far more importantly, in a multi-candidate field, that is the only kind of test that counts, given that there are already more than 2 candidates contesting the nomination, Trump still has majority support at 52%, while DeSantis drops further to 21%. To put that 31-point lead in context, in the last survey less than 2 weeks ago, Trump led DeSantis in the multi-candidate field by just 16 points at 44 to 28%. As to public opinion on the indictment, it is, not surprisingly, divided, and divided largely along partisan lines. Asked whether they approve or disapprove of Donald Trump being indicted for falsifying business records to conceal a hush money payment to a porn star, a narrow plurality of 42% said they approve, while 39% said they disapprove, and 19% said they weren't sure. As I said, that's split along partisan lines. 69% of Democrats approve, while 66% of Republicans disapprove. Among independents, 43% approve, while 37% disapprove. In the general election matchup, there's been no movement since the last poll. The survey shows a dead heat between President Biden and Trump, with Biden leading inside the margin of error at 45 to 43%. Among Democrats, Biden leads by 88 to 4%. Among Republicans, Trump leads by 86 to 6%. Among independents, Biden leads by 44 to 37%. Trump's campaign says it raised $4 million in the first 24 hours after the news of the indictment broke, and another $1 million since then. We learned late Sunday afternoon that Trump plans to give a speech from Mar-a-Lago at 8:15 p.m. on Tuesday night upon his return from his arraignment in Manhattan. One final note, anticipating your questions, no, there is no legal or constitutional prohibition on either a person under indictment or a felon running for or serving as president. The Constitution sets out the requirements for a candidate for president, and they are simple. First, the potential candidate must be a natural-born citizen of the United States. Second, the potential candidate must be at least 35 years old. Third, the potential candidate must have been a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. In addition, by dint of the addition of the 22nd Amendment, the candidate must not have been elected President of the United States twice already or have served more than 6 years in office as president. And while there is no record of a major party candidate running for president while under indictment, that's not to say no serious candidate has ever done it before. In 1920, Socialist Party candidate Eugene V. Debs, who had already run for president 4 previous times, ran for president for a 5th time from a prison cell. He was incarcerated in a federal penitentiary in Atlanta as the result of his 1918 conviction for violating the Sedition Act, which outlawed public opposition to U.S. involvement in World War I. He won almost 1 million votes. And that's our Washington report for this week.
Bill, thank you very much for that Washington report. We're going to skip questions today. If you do have questions about the Washington report, you can email those to us. You can always email me directly at jenny.beth@teapartypatriots.org. Again, that's Jenny, Jenny, .beth @teapartypatriots.org. Jenny.beth@teapartypatriots.org. And remember, at the beginning, my call to action is threefold, and it is, well, I guess it's fourfold. It is to be involved in election integrity activities, making sure that we are going to have secure, honest, and fair elections in 2024. If you are ready to do so, go ahead and begin volunteering on campaigns. Remember that Tea Party Patriots Citizens Fund, our 527 Super PAC, will engage in campaigns, but it probably will not be until 2024 when we're engaging in most races. So we're not doing that yet, but if you're ready to go ahead and volunteer, there are campaigns that are up and running and they already need your support. So go ahead and do that. Pray for our country. Pray for President Trump and his family, and pray for the people who seek to do us harm. And then remember that America is a great country. It is the greatest country that has ever been. And we need to continue to have faith that we will have a great country again. And that no matter how evil and tyrannical these radical leftists are, we are still going to be able to have the country that we love if we continue to take action and we don't lose hope in ourselves and our fellow patriots and also in our country. So please hold on to that. And with that, I'm closing out our lunch break live with Tea Party Patriots Action today. And if you do have any questions, please email me at jenny.beth@teapartypatriots.org. Thank you very much.